Tonight, when the sun goes down, you'll probably do something your ancestors would have considered almost impossible. You'll press a button, and suddenly, an entire room will be as bright as day. Your phone will glow, your television will turn on, streetlights will shine through the windows, and for the next several hours, darkness will basically become optional. But for almost all of human existence, night was unavoidable. Once the sun disappeared, there was no switch to flip, no glowing screen, no city lighting up the horizon, just the moon, the stars, maybe a fire, and then darkness. So what did humans actually do all night? Did they immediately go to sleep, sit around staring into a fire for hours, or spend the night watching for predators? And why does research from modern hunter-gatherers suggest that an entire camp may have almost never been asleep at the same time? The answer is stranger than you might expect, and it starts with one of the most important technologies humans ever learned to control: fire. At Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, archaeologists discovered burned plant material and bone associated with human ancestors dating back roughly 1 million years. Exactly when humans first learned to control fire and later create it on demand is still debated. Using a naturally occurring fire and knowing how to start one yourself are two very different technologies. But once humans could reliably keep a fire burning, night changed forever. Fire provided warmth, helped cook food, gave people visibility after sunset, and could help discourage dangerous animals from getting too close. But there may have been another consequence that was just as important. Fire extended the human day. For the first time, useful social time didn't necessarily end when sunlight disappeared. Imagine a group thousands of years ago. During daylight, almost everything has a purpose. Find food, gather plants, repair tools, watch children, move camp, prepare shelter, stay alive. Then the sun goes down, work slows, everyone gathers around a fire, and something strange happens. They start telling stories. We actually have modern evidence for this. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner studied conversations among the Ju-Hwanzi people of southern Africa. During the day, their conversations were overwhelmingly focused on immediate life, economic matters, complaints, social problems, and practical concerns. Only about 6% of daytime conversations involve storytelling, but after dark, around the fire, the pattern completely changed. About 81% of the longer nighttime conversations Wiesner recorded involved stories. Not instructions, stories. People talked about adventures, relationships, hunts, dangerous animals, people who weren't there, things that happened years earlier, traditional beliefs, and events that made everyone laugh. Think about what that means. The daylight world kept people alive, but the nighttime world may have helped people explain what being alive actually meant. Around a fire, knowledge could move from grandparents to children. A dangerous encounter from years earlier could become a lesson for someone who wasn't even alive when it happened. And someone could describe a distant place to a person who had never seen it. Fire didn't invent storytelling, and we can't know exactly when humans first began telling stories, but it may have created one of the best environments storytelling had ever had. Eventually, people went to sleep, but this is where things get really interesting, because there's evidence that many people in the past didn't always sleep the way we're told to sleep today. Historian Roger E. Kirch spent years studying diaries, court records, literature, and medical writing from the pre-industrial world. Again and again, he found references to something called a first sleep. And if there was a first sleep, there had to be another one. In many historical accounts, people went to sleep at night, woke sometime around midnight, stayed awake for a period, and then returned to bed for what was called their second sleep or morning sleep. And people didn't necessarily panic when they woke up. They prayed, talked, thought about dreams, tended fires, did household work, visited others, or simply stayed awake for a while. For them, waking in the middle of the night didn't automatically mean something had gone wrong. It could simply be part of the night. Then in 1992, psychiatrist Thomas Fair conducted an experiment that made the idea even more interesting. Participants accustomed to modern lighting were exposed to much longer periods of darkness, about 14 hours every night. Their sleep expanded and usually separated into two major periods, with roughly 1 to 3 hours of wakefulness between them. Nobody had instructed them to sleep that way. The longer darkness helped the pattern appear on its own. That sounds like proof that ancient humans naturally slept in 2 shifts, except it isn't. And this is where the story becomes more interesting than the simple version. Researchers have also measured sleep in present-day societies living without many features of modern industrial life. A 2015 study examined groups in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia. They generally did not go to sleep at sunset. On average, sleep began more than 3 hours afterward, and researchers did not observe a regular, long period of wakefulness, splitting every night into 2 separate sleeps. So the evidence doesn't tell us that every ancient human followed one universal sleep schedule. Human sleep was probably much more flexible. Season mattered, temperature mattered, latitude mattered, culture mattered, safety mattered, and the people around you mattered. That last part leads to one of the strangest discoveries about human nights. In 2017, researchers monitored the nighttime activity of Hadza hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. Sleeping is dangerous in the wild. When you're unconscious, you're vulnerable to animals, rival humans, fire, weather, and anything else approaching camp. So researchers wondered whether groups of humans might naturally stagger their sleep. And that's almost exactly what they found. Across 20 days of observation, every person in the group was simultaneously scored as asleep for only about 18 minutes total. Not 18 minutes each night, 18 minutes across the entire study. During 99.8% of the nighttime periods researchers measured, at least one person was awake or in a light enough state to register as awake. Nobody appeared to be assigning guards. Different people simply had different sleep schedules. Some went to sleep earlier, others stayed awake later, and older people often had different patterns from younger people. The result was something researchers described as sentinel-like behavior. Without organizing it, the group created something close to a nighttime security system. While some people slept, someone was almost always awake. And if similar differences existed in ancient groups, the prehistoric night may have looked nothing like a silent camp where everyone went unconscious at sunset. Some people slept, some whispered, someone fed the fire, someone comforted a child, someone watched the darkness beyond camp, and someone might have been telling the last story of the night. Hours later, those people could be asleep while someone else was awake. For most of history, darkness controlled human behavior. Then humans slowly started taking control of darkness. Cities began lighting streets, candles became more available, gas lighting appeared, and eventually electric lighting transformed everything. Even the word curfew preserves a tiny piece of the older world. It comes from an expression meaning cover fire. A nighttime bell could signal that hearth fires should be covered or banked, partly because unattended fires were incredibly dangerous in towns filled with combustible buildings. Then artificial lighting changed what nighttime meant. Work could continue, businesses could stay open, people could read late into the evening, and eventually televisions, computers, and smartphones pushed the usable day even farther into the night. But our biology didn't suddenly forget the sun. Light remains one of the strongest signals controlling the human circadian clock. In one experiment, researchers took people camping for a week without their normal electric light environment. Their internal clocks shifted earlier and became much more closely synchronized with the natural cycle of sunset and sunrise. In other words, remove enough artificial light, and the sun quickly starts taking control again. None of this means electricity ruined human sleep, and it doesn't mean waking up during the night is automatically some ancient instinct. The real story is more interesting than that. Humans seem to be extremely adaptable sleepers. We can sleep differently depending on light, season, temperature, culture, and the people around us. And before electricity, darkness wasn't simply 8 empty hours people had to survive until morning. Night had its own social world. People gathered around fires, passed down stories, watched over one another, and adapted their sleep around the world they lived in. Tonight, you'll probably never notice any of this. You'll turn on a lamp, look at your phone, and the darkness outside will barely matter. But imagine standing in the same place 20,000 years ago. No streetlights, no houses glowing in the distance, no aircraft blinking overhead. Just a small fire, a few people beside you, and a sky filled with more stars than most of us will ever see. For our ancestors, night wasn't the part of the day when nothing happened. It was an entirely different world. And we're only beginning to understand what humans did inside it. If you enjoy discovering the hidden science and history behind ordinary parts of life, subscribe to Evoform, because some of the strangest things humans ever did are things we once considered completely normal.